Welcome guys to the C3 Students YouTube channel. First things first, we gotta roll that intro because my man Maddox has a very important message for you.
What is up, YouTubers? How you doing? Make sure to smash that like button.
Hit the subscribe.
And hit the subscribe and turn on your notifications. If you are new to this channel, we will be giving away a free iPhone 11. Free iPhone 11.
All right, so I'm standing here in front of the new youth building. There is a ton of people who are essential workers, and these people working on our youth building are essential. They have been absolutely crushing it since the last time you've probably been here. As you can see, they got the drywall up. They're all grounded in, and so they can start working on the interior. It's really, really exciting to see. I posted some images on the Instagram story. Would love to see you. Soon enough, we will be having D groups, not virtually like this, but we will actually be right in there doing D groups, and I just cannot wait to do that with you guys. Thanks so much for participating in this virtual D group. We also would love for you to participate in Bible study with us every single morning at 11 a.m. We're going to continue to do D groups this way, even though they were scheduled to end next week. We're going to continue doing them because we miss you, and we are constantly looking for more and more opportunities to hang out with you. So we love you. We can't wait to see you again. And soon enough, there's hope. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We will be here in this building, and I cannot wait for that day. Love you guys. Now we're going to go off to Brian. I remembered to do the intro. Let's go. Roll that intro for Brian. Who's the guy who is so wise? He's walking down the hall. He gives the talks. It's Brian. He's Christian's dad. He's Noah's dad too. Everybody give it up for Brian!
Hey guys, great to be with you. I wanted to spend just a little bit of time. I wanted to let you know that we miss you guys so much, and we literally just prayed for you guys, and we're praying for you. Some of you guys are maybe feeling really sad about things that you have been dreaming of doing and aren't getting to do. I think of like prom or finishing up school year, or last maybe sports season that you were dreaming of doing, or band performance. Or I know there are lots of things that are really hard that you are missing, and we know you're sad, and so we're praying for you for that. Maybe some of you guys are afraid or worried about the virus, or about how your family or your friends are doing, maybe financially, or how this is affecting them or you. And so maybe some of you guys are afraid or worried. And some of you guys just may be really lonely right now, or bored. And then some of you may just feel totally disconnected from what anybody else is feeling. You're just kind of feeling disconnected from others. And so we're praying for you with all of that. All of those are legitimate things to feel right now, and it makes sense. So just know that we miss you terribly, and we're praying for you. And here's what I'm praying, is that all of you guys can hear God's voice calling out to you right now. The Good Shepherd, Jesus' voice, is calling out to you. And I was thinking of this, and I was thinking of this camping trip that I took with Andy and Christian this last summer. We went, and Noah couldn't go because I think he was on the SLT trip or something like that. But Andy and Christian and I went, and we camped by the Hiawassee River. And I specifically picked out this campsite that was right by the river. When I looked on the map, I thought, oh, that'll be awesome because we'll be able to hear the river when we're in our tents and we're laying down. And I thought that would be so awesome. But when we got there, there was a little separation between us and the river by some trees, but we were very close. But we couldn't hear the river because these crickets were so, I don't know if they were crickets or cicada bugs or something, but they were so loud. And all we could hear was this super loud chirping, and I was kind of a little bit annoyed. I was like, man, I wanted to hear the river. And so I remember, us talking about it, and then we were laying down when we finally decided to go to sleep after our fire and everything, and we were laying down, And Christian said, after like maybe a minute, he said, "Hey, Dad, I think I can hear the river." And I started listening, and it was like our ears were like tuned in to the river, and we could hear it like all of a sudden behind that noise of the chirping. And then it seemed very prominent, like we could notice it. And it was like, how did we not hear that before? And I wanted you to think for a second, that's the way God is calling to us right now. It's there, it's happening. He's calling to you. Jesus is calling to you right now. And sometimes it's hard to hear it because of all the other things that are going on, or just because we are very content with the video game playing or whatever else is happening, and we can't hear that. But if we're still and we tune our ears, you can hear him. And I pray that you can hear that, and that you can hear it just like he called to Esther, that he's calling you and he called her for a time such as this. So I wanted to do a quick recap of the story that we've started from Esther. It's such an unbelievable story. I hope you guys are enjoying it. I know I was just blown away by it. But I want to do a quick recap of what we saw last week with Mark's amazing dramatization of the story. So we met some main characters. We met King Xerxes, also known as King Ahasuerus. That's the Hebrew version, but he's the king of Persia. And we learned that he was extremely rich and powerful, and he loved to show those things off. And we learned that he also loved to show off his beautiful wife, Queen Vashti. But he banished her whenever she refused to play along with that desire to show her off at this banquet. So she's gone. And he has this huge contest. We said it was kind of like the first version of The Bachelor, to see who gets to be his new queen, oh lucky woman. And that's where we meet Esther, and she wins this contest. And she does this by hiding her Jewish background and by going along with whatever is asked of her, even if it means violating the laws of her Jewish faith. And it's not a great start for this would-be hero of the faith. And so it's kind of a surprising choice that God made, that this is the person that he was going to be using. But the story's not over. And so this is where we pick up with this, with the next part of the story. And so we're going to watch that story now.
Please tell Queen Esther this message is from Mordecai, and it involves the king's life. I heard 2 of his doorkeepers discuss their anger against him and how they are conspiring against him. Go and tell her immediately.
Thank Mordecai for his faithfulness to King Xerxes. I passed on the message in his name, and a plot was discovered. The 2 servants of the king have been punished by hanging. This deed has been recorded in the book of the Chronicles of the king.
After all these events, King Xerxes promotes Haman, the son of Hammedantha, the Agite, above all the other princes, okay? So all the king's servants paid homage to Haman as the king instructed. Except for Mordecai, since the Jews and the Agites were bitter enemies.
I will not bow to Haman.
Haman.
Mordecai does not bow down to me as the king has instructed. I am filled with such anger. But I will have my revenge not just upon Mordecai, but against all his people, the Jews.
So lots, which are also called pur, are cast out in front of Haman to determine the time to betray the Jews to King Xerxes. The 12th month is chosen, and Haman goes to the king to present his evil scheme.
My king, there are certain people living within your kingdom who do not keep your laws. Let the decree be made, be written, that they may be destroyed. I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to accomplish
All right, Haman, take my signet ring. The people and the money are given to you. Do with them whatever seems good to you. Call my scribes and send out your instructions to all provinces within my kingdom.
So Haman instructs all of the king's satraps, the governors of each province, the officials, and all of the people to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all of the Jews, both young and old, little children and women, on the 13th day of the 12th month, and to take all of their possessions.
Bruh.
So thank you guys, our actors who volunteered, because that was amazing to be able to see you guys acting that out and helping catch us up with what's going on in the next part of this story. And we see some incredible things happening, right? Like we see Mordecai, Esther's older cousin, who helped raise her. He's her cousin, but he's older, and he helped raise Esther. And he has this position where he sits in the gates of the palace. And we saw that he's there, sitting there, and he hears about that plot to kill King Xerxes. And he happened to be at the right place at the right time to hear this. And he's able to pass on this warning to Esther. And because of that, the king is saved. And meanwhile, while that happens, King Xerxes, he doesn't promote Mordecai, but he promotes Haman. Haman the Agagite. That's going to become important. We're going to talk about that in a minute, why they describe him that way, the Agagite. Above all the other officials, he's elevated to the highest position under the king. Well, when Mordecai is faced with Haman, he won't bow down to Haman. And that fills Haman with rage. And I said that there was a reason why it was important that Haman is described as the Agagite. Let me tell you a little bit of background about it. That's because Haman is a descendant of Agag, who was the head of the Amalekites. And the Amalekites were long enemies of Israel. And his ancestor, Agag, had actually been on a mission to destroy the Israelites. And he had come up against King Saul, the king of Israel. And they were in war and were enemies. So they have a long history, because guess what? Mordecai is a descendant of Saul. And so they know their histories. And this is why Mordecai will not bow down to Haman, because he knows that this is a descendant who was out to kill his people. And he will not bow down to that, because it would be a denial of his own faith and of his own people, the Jewish people. But when he won't do that, Haman is filled with rage. And he doesn't only come up with the plan to kill Mordecai, he plans to kill all of the Jewish people. He's continuing in the plan that his ancestor Agag had. He is trying to continue that plan to wipe out the Jewish people. And King Xerxes listens to Haman's plan and decides to go along with it. He has no problem with it. And so notices are sent throughout the land that on the 13th day, on the 12th of the 12th month, all of the Persian people could kill their Jewish neighbors. This makes me think of like the Purge or something horrible like that. But that they could kill their Jewish neighbors and steal all their goods. And so there's these notices that go up around that's going to be not only allowed but encouraged. And I want you to think about that for a minute, like what that must have felt like. Can you imagine the fear and the sadness that the Jewish people must have felt when this notice went out? It was confusing to everyone including probably the Persians, like why this was going to be happening. And their lives were turned upside down in an instant. They had been going about living their normal lives and minding their own business, and now all of a sudden there was this threat and they didn't know how they would survive. Can you relate to that a little bit? I mean, what we're going through right now is only a fraction. It's not nearly as devastating or scary as that, but maybe it helps us to just tune in a little bit to like what that felt like, to have your life suddenly turned upside down and everything's different, and to feel fear or unknown. And that must have been terrifying. And it makes you wonder, like, where is God when this is happening? How could God let such a thing happen? Won't he act and save his people from this evil plan or from this virus? Like, where is God? So Mordecai, because of this position that he has of sitting in the palace gates, he is terrified and he's sad. It says he dresses in sackcloth and he tears his robes. That's a sign of mourning and distress. And he does that in violation with the law, actually. And he draws attention to himself in a dangerous way, but he does it and is able to communicate to Esther through her messengers because of that position that he's been given. And he got that position because Esther had been made queen. And so I want you to think, was that all by coincidence? We're asking, where's God? Was it by coincidence that he had this position where he was able to communicate to Esther what was happening and to call her to action? God had placed Mordecai there, and he had placed Esther where she was. And I want you to think about this. Just take a step back. In the Bible, we see that God is not only using priests or prophets or trained ministers. You see him using all kinds of people throughout the Bible. You see him using married people, single people, widows, masters and kings, slaves and servants, men, women, old and young. And God uses everyone, and he has placed them in their specific spots with their specific stories and backgrounds. He's placed them to use them. And he's placed you. That's what I want you to think about, is that maybe you doubt that. Maybe you feel like you don't matter that much. You're just a person who's just, not got any kind of influence. But, Esther felt that too. She was doubting whether she had any influence. And so when Mordecai tells her, you've got to speak up and you've got to do something, she doubts that she could make a difference. She mentions to him, like, hey, I haven't been called to the king in like over a month. He's turned his attention to other women in his harem. I don't think that he'll listen to me. And she doubts whether she could make a difference. So if you're doubting whether you can make a difference, she could relate. Or maybe you feel that if you have gotten some kind of influence or popularity, maybe you got it in shady ways, and so maybe it's not legit, and God wouldn't want to use you because you got there in a way that was not really you following him. Well, Esther probably felt that too. Remember, she violated a lot of the Mosaic laws and things to be able to arrive in the position that she was. So, but God was still going to use her. And maybe you fear how you'll be treated if you do speak up for others or for your faith. Esther felt that. She tells Mordecai, like, are you serious? Do you know what would happen? Like, going and arriving before the king without him having called you meant death. Like, that you were interrupting him, and it was disrespectful. And the normal thing to happen to people if they tried to do that was that they were killed. That's how King Xerxes thought of himself. And so she knew that was a huge risk, and so she was afraid. But Mordecai reminds her that none of this is by accident, and that the whole reason that she's there in the kingdom It's not for her to simply take care of herself or even her family. And this is where we get this theme verse that I asked you to put on a bookmark. I've got mine. I remembered it. I meant to bring Brenda's this time because hers looks better than mine. But like I said before, don't worry if yours is crafty or beautiful. Just make a bookmark for yourself. But this is where we get the theme verse that I wanted you to put on there, which is, it says, Mordecai says to her, "And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for a time such as this?" He's reminding her, you have been placed here. And remember, we talked about God's never mentioned by name in this story, but he is behind the scenes. And that's what Mordecai is reminding Esther of right now, is that God is at work and he has placed you here for this time. And this is a major turning point in the story. Esther listens and she acts. And she knows what she must do because she knows that Mordecai is right. And for the first time, we see her not just listening to what others tell her to do. She feels led, and so she's acting. Who's leading? She tells Mordecai to gather all of the Jewish people in Susa, that's the capital of Persia there, and she tells them, gather all the Jewish people. She's telling him now, this is what we got to do. And she's not just receiving orders, she knows God is leading her. And she tells him, get all the Jewish people together in Susa and have them fast and pray for 3 days and 3 nights. And she says, and my servants and I will do the same. So she's not acting on her own power. She's looking to God, and she's asking for his help and his blessing. And she doesn't know what will happen, but she's going to act. And so she trusts. And she decides that she will approach the king at great risk to herself, despite the possibility that she might die. And she says this other famous line from Esther, and she says, and if I perish, I perish. But she knows that she has to act. What has changed so dramatically in her? Where did this courage come from? Well, her security shifted. Her security had been on her palace that she lived in, but it shifted from the palace to the God that placed her there. And she knows that it's for a reason. And so she knows that all the riches in the world are worth nothing if she's not serving her true king. And that's not King Xerxes. It's God. When we look at this verse and when we look at why we chose this even now for a time such as this, does this mean that there are certain pivotal times in our lives when God uses us, just certain times, and do we have to wait for those times? Is this that time? Some people feel like it might be because it's such a crazy, unique, and extraordinary time. So people feel like maybe this is a time that we're called to act. Other people feel like, man, no, maybe this is just like a waiting time. It's like hibernation. Life isn't really happening right now. And so we're just filling it with video games or Zoom calls or sleeping in. And so maybe this isn't a time to act, it's just a time to wait. But the truth is that every time is a time that God is up to something. The story is never ending. It's still being pushed forward. And he is inviting you to take part in the story. That part that only you can play. The part that you were written for. He's calling you into that story right now. Remember when I talked about hearing the river underneath the chirping of the crickets or the cicada? Like, if we're listening, can we listen to what God is up to right now? And ask, how do we join in? Esther wasn't perfect, but she woke up to the fact that despite her flaws, God loved her and he had placed her in this place to use her. And she trusted him and his will for her life. Her life was pointing to someone who would do that even better, Jesus. Jesus left a palace that put Xerxes' palace to shame. And Jesus left that palace behind so that Esther and so that you and I could be forgiven and made clean and forever beautiful, and that we could live with him forever. And because we know that he loves us that much and that our security is forever with him, we can risk big, just like Esther did. And we can act for others, and we can look for ways to join in on the story that God is telling right now. And so I'm asking you, like this week, will you pray on that? This is what it means when we pray in the Lord's Prayer, when Jesus gives us that as an example, when we ask for his will to be done. And we're asking for it to happen here on earth as in heaven. And we're listening to what is that will that he has, and how do we enter into it. Ask God to open up your eyes to how much he loves you, to give you that security in it and not the other things of this world, and that will allow us to risk big like Esther. And let us look for the ways that he wants to use us. If you haven't made your bookmark, make a bookmark so you'll remember this. I wrote a little note to myself on the back of what this time was like when I made it and what I want to remember from it. Maybe do the same for yours. And then read chapters 5 through 7. I know you guys some of you guys already read chapter 5. Read it over again if you can. 5 through 7 in Esther this week, and we'll talk about that next time. And some of you guys acting it out will act it out for us, and I'm so thankful for that. And we're thankful for all you guys. I hope you have a great week. Love you guys.